What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the DS Pod. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, as well as, come on the show. It's always open. As you see here, I have a friend of mine, Jack Stern. Jack, you want to introduce yourself to everyone and tell them your credentials, as they say?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm happy to come on. I'm
My pleasure.
thankful for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to talking some NFL, some college football. I have a bone to pick with a couple of people, but I'll get to that a little bit later.
All right, now you're talking.
Yes, so I work as a columnist where I write bi-weekly columns for CBS Sports Radio. And then I also work as an update anchor. So I do updates on the radio as well. And then I also work as a producer on WFAN and CBS Sports Radio. So really, I'm kind of like I'm a jack of all trades. Right? I have three roles that kind of encompass exactly what I'm doing currently at the radio station where I work for Odyssey, the parent company, which owns both WFAN and CBS Sports Radio. And then I also serve kind of as a guest panelist / contributor on a variety of other programs. I'm sure, Daniel, that you saw me on Sports Shorts on SNY and the NY Post Sports Network.
It was a great clip.
A couple of radio stations across the country, too, to talk about some of the columns that I've done. For example, 2 weeks ago when I wrote about Clemson and Dabo Swinney, I went on a station called The Fan Upstate, which is actually located in South Carolina. So I've kind of served as a guest as well in my current role.
Okay,
so
awesome.
I know that was a little bit of a long-winded answer.
No, that not at all. That's a good healthy background. And just one question: what are your future aspirations and goals with this thing that you're doing now with your career? Do you see yourself TV? Do you see yourself, having your own show? Like what does it look like for you? Just in your back of your head, just out of curiosity.
Well, on some level, that's $1 million question that doesn't necessarily have an answer. And that's not just me giving coach speak and taking the high road here. It's just
you sound like Robert Saleh a little bit.
That was not my intention. I'll say that much. But
all right, now that you bring up the Jets, let's get dirty.
You had to. But I think that with the way that the digital media landscape is evolving, where I'm at, 5 years from now is not anywhere that I expect to be in the current moment. So I definitely aspire to do more in the digital space and the on-camera capacity. I definitely envision myself doing more of that. I've loved my experience in radio. I've gotten a lot out of it. I've been doing it for 2.5 years now. Obviously, I've grown in that role, and I've really developed, and I've enjoyed it. And it's definitely a place where I have more on the bone to pick off. And I think as my career grows, I'm going to have unlimited opportunities for growth potential as well, both internally and externally. And I'm really excited to see where the future takes me. I'm definitely hoping to do some more writing at some point. I really love getting to kind of give my opinion. When I do updates, my job is a little bit different. I'm kind of delivering.
Are you allowed to use ChatGPT at work, or it's not? You don't want to disclose that information. You take the fifth again.
No, I'm not talking about that. But no, on a more serious note, like I like getting to do my column, and I like getting to be a guest color guy, if you want to call it that, because I have an opportunity to give my opinion. And as a Brooklyn guy, I'm sure you can relate to this. We have opinions. It's in our DNA. We can't keep our thoughts to ourselves. So I always really like to kind of be able to take a stance on something that's going on in the sports world.
Every New York fan thinks that they could run a franchise better than the people who are running the franchise. So if you meant that by opinion, we have strong opinions in New York.
We can differentiate too, because the people that are in Long Island and in New Jersey, they might have opinions, but they're not as opinionated, and they're not right like we are, right? We grew up in Brooklyn, and naturally we're right about everything.
We're right. We're always right.
About the subway or a road that's blocked off, we're still right at the end of the day. Let's be honest about
We're always right. And no scooped out bagels. Sorry, California.
No, I'm not doing it. And I lived on the West Coast for a period of my life as well. Well, not necessarily the West Coast, but the Pacific Northwest / Rocky Mountain region, whatever you want to call it, in Colorado. And I can confirm that the bagels there are not nearly as good. Sorry to everyone.
There you go.
Bagels with jalapenos or meat in them in a couple of cases, but I like my thick, nice, doughy, chewy, everything bagels that I get from La Bagel Delight, which is my local bagel place here.
Shout out.
Personal preference for me.
Okay, awesome. So let's just dive in straight to the Jets. No, what do you think?
Yeah,
We're coming up on right now 4-7. Been a disappointing season to say the least. To say the least. I mean, I'm a Jets fan my whole life, and this is just the hope was at the all-time high because months and months of build up leading up to Rodgers, which we're kind of in the same place again because he's just been announced that he's opening up a 21-day practice window. And just what are you seeing from your perspective on the season, where they're at in the next going forward for the next year, and just what is the vibe around the franchise? Just because I can't really get a grip on it. I don't know. I listened to Robert Saleh. He says we're doing amazing, and I'm like, you're throwing for 10 yards every week. How are we doing amazing? It sounds very political correctness coming out of the coach's mouth, coach talk, like you said. Bill Belichick, next question, please. I'm only here so I don't get fined. There's not a lot of, in my opinion, there's not a lot of real strategy coming from an offensive perspective. There's no creativity. I'm not seeing, we had this issue last year. We went from Zach Wilson to Flacco to Mike White to this one to that one. There's no answer at the QB position, and there's dysfunction, and there's just a lot of unhappy parts to the franchise with Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. And anyway, that's the question, but yeah, take it from there.
Well, first off, let me start off by saying that Robert Saleh is in an abnormally difficult position. I don't think when he took the job a couple of years ago that he ever envisioned being in a spot where he had no control over picking his quarterback in terms of who the organization drafted. And if that wasn't bad enough.
He didn't have a say in whether or not it would be Zach Wilson or, let's say, who are the other options at that, Mac Jones or whatever. Not that it would have been better.
That was a bad draft class after Trevor Lawrence. I think a lot of fans were upset because the organization was having a really bad year. Obviously, they lost that game to the Raiders, and it's like, okay, we're going to get the number one pick.
And then they won.
Didn't necessarily end up materializing the way a lot of fans expected it to. They were stuck in the number 2 slot. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence at the time was being viewed as a generational talent. They weren't going to be able to trade up with the Jaguars. And then do you still feel that way about Trevor Lawrence now? I feel that way more about Trevor Lawrence this year than I felt in any previous year. I think he's really on the right track. And he's surrounded by a lot of weapons. They did a good job of, they got rid of the coach, whatever. But that's sidetracked. Yeah, continue. We've learned about the value of good coaching and how much that really impacts a rookie, especially during a very formative stage of their career, which is year 1 and year 2, when they're really learning the playbook and how to function in the NFL. But going back to Saleh, he's in a difficult predicament because he wasn't necessarily able to pick his quarterback the way that he had hoped to. And then he had a very established player at the position, probably one of the best ever to line up under center, in Aaron Rodgers. And he gets hurt right away, not even 10 minutes into his Jets stay. In his head, he had the solution to his problem for months, right? He was on the franchise. He was working with the team. He was exciting. He's a veteran. He knows what he's doing. He's also a Hall of Famer and like a 4-time MVP and a Super Bowl champion. So in his head, like you said, his prayers had been answered. And then in the most Jetsian way possible, he went down right away. But, on some level, that's what the organization gets for failing to develop a franchise quarterback. Remember, and I wrote about this in my column on CBS Sports Radio as well, the Jets haven't been able to really develop a franchise guy since Joe Namath. Now, there was a nice little stint with Chad Pennington, Mark Sanchez.
Mark Sanchez, two championship games. But so touch on that a little bit. Does it come down to the ownership's responsibility? It's a different coach every time. It's a different GM. They change the system, and yet the franchise label of not being able to develop a quarterback is a stink that just lays around like you got sprayed by a skunk, and no matter what you do, you can't get rid of the smell. That's just what it looks like. Yeah, no, it is what it looks like. But the reason why, Daniel, is because they haven't done a good enough job of getting them the tools they need to succeed. I think the one constant with this organization. When you say tools, you mean offensive line, wide receivers. The offensive line has not been very good.
The play at
Nope.
receiver, aside from Garrett Wilson, has at times been borderline incompetent. I mean, last week they scratched Alan Lazard, someone they signed to a $44 million
44.
contract.
Brutal.
Said we're not playing him at all.
Well, he's not playing. He's not doing anything.
But that, to me, that's beside the point, because the play is not good enough.
No, but so then see, this is where being surprised by Aaron Rodgers' injury is a two separate thing. Because if your number 2 wide receiver wasn't good enough to put on the field when he's healthy, I'm not. How could that be how you started off the season? I'm talking management. I'm talking ownership. How'd you go into a year and say, okay, we have no wide receivers outside of Garrett Wilson? I don't understand that. I was saying let them draft one of these guys, and they all look very good. Jordan Addison, Jackson Smith, the other guy, Zay Flowers. They all look, really competent, really good players with bright futures.
TCU, who's playing with the Chargers as well.
Yeah, no.
I think the philosophy there was that Aaron Rodgers, dating back to his days with the Packers, is always
would make everyone better
at getting the most out of his supporting cast. So if you give him a really solid wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, had a really nice tight end as well with Conklin, maybe they can kind of optimize the production of everyone else. There's one name that we're excluding from the discussion as well that cannot be excluded, and that's Mecole Hardman. Remember, they kind of had to put him outside like a used couch after he was underachieving with the Jets, and then he ended up landing with the Kansas City Chiefs, where he was last season. That ultimately didn't work out, mainly because Zach Wilson hasn't been good. But I'm not willing to sit here and blame the organization for incompetent wide receiver play this time around, because it was all about getting Rodgers as many pieces.
As long as he would have been on the field, the play would have been better. That's what you mean.
That strategy is kind of flawed, right? Because you're expecting a lot from someone who's turning 40 years old soon. He's playing up against.
But we've seen it happen before. It's not like Jets are creating a new strategy. They did this with Favre. You had the Bucks do it with Brady. Favre went with the Vikings to very far and very deep in the playoffs. Like, it's not. Did he win a Super Bowl? I don't remember. He win a Super Bowl with the Vikings?
He won a Super Bowl with Green Bay, but remember, he came up short with the Vikings. They made it to the NFC Championship game.
Right, they lost to the Saints.
New Orleans.
They lost to the Saints. It was a very bad play call. I remember in overtime or something. I forgot exactly what it was. I remember. And then, no, but my point is that going to get an old quarterback to be the key to your franchise is not like this new invention. We just saw the Rams win a Super Bowl by just inserting Stafford into a already-made roster, and now they're nowhere. They're kind of nowhere. But my point is that it's not like the Jets didn't discover something new. They didn't really like have a choice to go after who else were you going to go get? You were going to stay with Zach Wilson? No. You were going to go after Derek Carr? No. You could go after Jimmy Garoppolo? No.
That would not have been a fit. So I was opposed to that. I would have been okay with Jimmy Garoppolo, although in hindsight, that decision obviously probably
would not. I don't think that would have worked out.
I have a big issue with having Zach Wilson as your backup when he's done nothing to earn his spot, even on the team.
I have the same thought. Why wouldn't they just allow Mike White to be on the roster? At least this way you have 2 backups. If one of them doesn't play well, you throw in the other. I just don't get it. Instead, you had Tim Boyle, who it looked like they didn't want to play.
Right.
And this is where I get upset. I get upset when I know, like you said, Robert Saleh is an impossible position, but he can't get up there in front of the media and say Zach's playing well when he's thrown for like 7 touchdowns in his career. It just. Don't lie to me. You know what I mean? I'm already upset in my life. I'm a Jets fan.
That's very political in my mind, because Saleh was not the one who ultimately picked Wilson. It's clear that he expressed to Joe Douglas that he didn't want him when a media member asked him, were you behind this? And he said, well, I'll keep that between us. No, that wasn't exactly an endorsement.
So he was just doing what he had to do.
This was not the guy I wanted. And what's he supposed to do? Get up in front of the media and say, we suck, we're not getting the job done? No. He needs to inspire.
Have you never seen a coach or a manager say that and was actually respected it? Like Steve Kerr the other night made a couple of mistakes at the end of the Warriors game. They blew like a 29-point lead or something, and he owned it in the press. He said, "Listen, it wasn't my best night as a coach. I made some mistakes, and we're going to learn from it. We're going to go forward." Like I I don't see taking responsibility or putting the blame on yourself as a negative thing. I see Brian Dable do it. I'm not saying that Robert Saleh didn't take responsibility. I'm not even attacking him. This is not about him. It's just that we're in year 3, and it's what have we seen? We don't win games. The offense is incompetent, and now this is the part where I want you, because you're a little bit more knowledgeable, I want you to walk me through the plan for the next year and a half. What do we do at the end of this year? Is Rodgers playing? Is he not playing? Should he play? Even if they're out of the playoffs, I think he should still play. We need to see what we have. He's 40 years old. What is he? Is he MVP Rodgers, or is he last season in Green Bay Rodgers? I want the answer to that question before I go into next year and waste another year. You know what I'm saying?
So the way I'm going to put it to you here is that I'm okay with them going into next season with Rodgers as starter. Yes, that comes with its fair share of risks, right? He got hurt this year. You don't know how he's going to rebound from the injury. It's nice that he's back on the practice field after 2 months, but let's see how things go.
It's crazy that he is. It's nice, but it's amazing. It's really amazing.
When 300-pound linemen are chasing after
I know,
him,
it's a little different.
It's going to be a lot different. But with that being said, I'm okay with them going into next year with Aaron Rodgers as the guy. I'm comfortable with him as my quarterback, even if he's 75% of what Aaron Rodgers was at the peak of his career.
It's better than anything we've ever had.
Average starter in the NFL, and I think it's a safe option for them when you think about it that way. Now, with that in mind, I think that you need to, at a minimum, have a serviceable backup. There's no way that Zach Wilson is with the Jets next season. I think it's best for both sides to just kind of wipe the slate clean, get a fresh start, allow him to have a change of scenery, and allow us to get another backup. But I don't think it would be.
So I just curiosity, where does Zach Wilson go from here? He gets a job in finance. Like, what does he do? What does he do from here? You really think an NFL team is going to take a flyer on a guy who has the same numbers as Jamarcus Russell through 3 seasons? I just don't see it.
Right, and he has a negative touchdown to interception ratio, 21-25. Look, he hasn't really shown a lot in the NFL, and I'm willing to acknowledge that.
He has flashes. He's shown flashes. He's shown flashes where if he could play the way he plays in that flash all the time, he'll be good.
Based on what he's shown and based off who he was in college, I think he could potentially go be a backup somewhere and get an opportunity to work his way back into the starting lineup, similar to what we saw with Jameis Winston early in his career. We're kind of seeing the same thing, obviously, to a lesser degree with Mitchell Trubisky, first with the Bills, now in Pittsburgh as well. Right. I think that would kind of be a nice option for him, but he's not going to get to go be a starter somewhere else. It's not like the situation we saw with Carson Wentz, where he kind of just fell out of favor in Philadelphia, was traded to the Colts, got a fresh start there, and was able to kind of walk in and be the starter right away. Wilson is not going to get to be the starter, especially after being demoted to the QB3 spot, where he's not even active on game day, isn't even wearing a uniform for that matter. So I think he's probably going to.
You don't think it's crazy that a franchise drafts a QB number 2 overall, and this guy is just, like you said, not shown us anything. He's played in the NFL for 3 years, and there's really nothing. There's nothing. You don't think that's a crazy concept just to think about? You know what I mean? Or it's just that hard to hit on the talent.
Well, it isn't, because he played at BYU, and BYU was unaffiliated at the time, and he wasn't playing against great competition. Now, I know a lot of people are making the same argument about Josh Allen at Wyoming. All of these things are true, but last time I checked, Josh Allen has a lot more desirable attributes to work with.
Yes, like his size and his arm.
Drafting Josh Allen, and that's something that Jets fans have contemplated it as well.
Even though he turns the ball over way, way too much, but whatever. I mean, he throws touchdowns. So
drafting any of these guys is essentially buying a raw piece of ice and saying, I'm going to mold this and I'm going to chip it into a statue. It's a major gamble, and you don't really know how it's going to work out until you're reflecting on that decision, 5, maybe even some cases 10 years down the line.
Right.
So, it was impossible to know that it would go this badly, but given the lack of resources, the organization's history, everything that's transpired, I don't necessarily know that I'd be surprised over something like this.
It's just so that what you just said, when does that change and how does that change? Let's say Aaron Rodgers plays well next year and we go to the playoffs. I'm not saying win the Super Bowl, because that's obviously a crazy, achievement. But my point is, once he's done, he's a rental, right? He's as Evan Roberts would say, a mercenary piece of crap. That's the point. Is he's a ticking time bomb. His career is almost over. He's 40 years old, and then where do you draft a quarterback next year? Do you say, you know what, we as a franchise cannot draft a quarterback, so let's just always, we'll just be that franchise that just goes and gets, we'll go for Russell Wilson for we'll get him from somewhere else. We'll get the veteran quarterback that's already established himself in the NFL. Maybe that's a plan. Maybe they should lean into that, because I don't see them either that, or maybe just draft like 7 quarterbacks. Because then maybe, like you said, if they have a bunch of pieces of ice, maybe they could chisel one of them into an NFL quarterback.
I'll put it to you this way. If they're going to draft a quarterback in the later rounds, this is the year to do it, because this is a really, really good class. I mean, beyond just Caleb Williams and Drake May, who are the unanimous
so many. I've heard so many names. There's a Tagovailoa in the draft, which is, I know, late. They said he's going to go late. Then there's the Penix guy. There's so many. There's just so much talent.
Michael Penix from Washington. I'm going to list a couple guys. I talked about this well. Penix from Washington. J.J. McCarthy from Michigan. Quinn Ewers from Texas. A little bit less proven, but still a decent prospect nonetheless. And then the apple of my eye, and that's exactly how I phrased it, the guy who I think would be perfect for the Jets is Bo Nix from Oregon. Obviously, 59 career starts. He played in the SEC and the Pac-12, so you can't make the argument that he hasn't faced anyone, because a lot of the defenders he went up against are ultimately going to be playing in the NFL. Really good at protecting the football. Seems like someone who's really coachable. I mean, he developed nicely.
Right. And where's his draft projection at this current time?
So this is where things really start to get interesting, because the Jets are going to be picking probably in the top 10 at their current trajectory.
Don't say that. Right? They're going to make the playoffs.
With them being where they are in terms of having a roster that needs a lot of work, I think they need to go in a different direction in terms of the position they draft. I don't think you can draft a quarterback this high, or that high rather. And May, Williams are going to be unavailable. Nix, Penix are probably not worthy of reaching for that much.
So they're going to go offensive linemen.
I think
probably.
When it comes to quarterback, I think you need to look at drafting a quarterback early in the second round, because remember, you're going to have a pretty good pick in the second round, given that Rodgers will have not played 65% of the snaps this year. That pick was dependent on that happening. So they're going to get a really nice pick in the second round. Green Bay hasn't been that good either. And that's where you can either trade into the first round and get one of these players on a 4-year deal, which includes that option for a 5th season, which is huge because it allows you to give him an extra year in terms of a trial run.
Developing, right?
If you have Rodgers next year, you're going to have 4 years guaranteed of whoever you take at the end of the first round. Or option B is you sit where you are at the top of the second round and hope that Nix, Penix, McCarthy, whoever it may be, falls right into your lap.
Right.
With that being said, I think that Penix and Nix are ultimately going to raise their stock at the combine. And by the time people see them,
they'll be top 10.
They're going to be, if not in the top 10, probably in the top 20, because the quarterback value is very high in the draft. If you have a quarterback that you really like, there's reason to go reaching for them. I just don't think the Jets should do it if they're picking, say, 8th or 9th, and they really need help at the offensive line.
Wide receiver. What do you think about Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do you think he's I
don't think that Harrison.
What do they call him? What's his nickname? The Bugatti or something? What do they call him?
Marvelous Marvin. That was his dad's nickname, actually. So
no, they call him
something like that. But I'll put it to you this way, Daniel. Harrison's probably not going to be there for them either. But if someone like Rome Odunze, who's one of those receivers that helped raise Michael Penix's stock at Washington, is there at 9th, even if you get the second best receiver, you're still getting upgrades at the position. You're still getting someone for Rodgers or whoever you draft to grow with.
And you don't need to pay him right away.
For those reasons alone, I think you pull the trigger. A couple of years ago, it's funny, this was the COVID year draft, actually. When the Jets drafted Mekhi Becton, I thought that they should have gotten Jerry Jeudy. There's no telling how Jeudy would have developed if he was on the Jets.
Yeah, he would have been even worse than he is now.
it's always nice for them to have a couple of playmakers in the barn, not just to grow together, but also to take the pressure off one another. I think part of the reason Wilson has taken a major step back this year is because he's been double teamed.
Yeah. They just planned the game around him. How do we stop Garrett Wilson and then let everyone else beat you?
I think that you got to prioritize an offensive lineman or receiver early in the first round. And then with your second pick of the draft, wherever you decide to go with that, whether it be trading up into the first round or standing pat in the second round, that's when you make the decision to go quarterback or not go quarterback. I tend to believe they're going to take a quarterback, even if they're not listening to our podcast right now and thinking about taking Bo Nix. I do believe
they should listen.
I agree. I do believe that someone that could drop to a later round. I think Quinn Ewers is one of those types of guys.
And you mentioned those. You mentioned those Colorado players. You're a Colorado alum, so if you wanted to get into that, now's a great time that you brought up the quarterback.
We can do the transition, but I'll preempt that by saying Colorado's not going to have a lot of draft picks this year, and the quarterback coming out of Colorado, Shedeur Sanders,
is he staying?
Everyone really likes. Yes, by all indications, he's going to be staying at Colorado for a fifth season. So I guess this is a good time to transition. I can talk a little bit about Shedeur. I think he's going to be a really nice NFL quarterback at some point. He definitely has all the tools, really nice arm strength, fantastic accuracy, good decision maker. But he needed another season of seasoning. And also keep in mind that this is a very saturated draft class in the sense that
so he wouldn't be ranked as high unless he waited either way. It's a good decision to wait.
You have the reigning Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams.
You think he's going number one overall? That's a lock, automatic?
Yes.
Whoever trades up to get that pick, because we don't know what the Bears want to do with Justin Fields, still to this day.
I think you have Williams and May, and then Penix and Nix. Beyond that, though, you have Jaden Daniels, who's likely going to win the Heisman Trophy this year coming out of LSU. So I think the concern with Shedeur is that, he wasn't going to be drafted as highly as he thought he could be. Now, obviously, that's a double-edged sword because if he comes back to Colorado next season
and he doesn't play well,
bad year, and say Carson from Georgia or some of the other prospects that are going to be in the 2025 class have outstanding seasons, then all of a sudden he's not getting picked as highly as he thought he might. And also, Daniel, I think that the thing that stands out to me about Shedeur, and this is having watched him a lot and having analyzed his tape, gone back and watched it after the fact, is he really holds the ball way too long to be an NFL quarterback. And it's not like he was facing the world beaters of
like Zach Wilson. He's going to get sacked all day.
Yeah. He took 10 more sacks than any quarterback at the FBS.
Wow.
And that to me is a really big red flag. Because
but I feel like that's something that's learnable. Like as long as you're a coachable player, you can learn like, okay, we got to do 3-step drop and get the ball out after one read. Don't hold the ball. You know what I mean? Like,
I'll say this much about that. The offensive line play at Colorado is a large reason why he was sacked so much. But at the same time, I think it also has to do with him wanting the perfect window, wanting the wide open receiver, and maybe getting a little bit too greedy in terms of where he wants to push the ball. Right. I do respect how careful he was with it, only had 3 interceptions. But at the same time, I mean, on some level, I'd like to see him be a little bit more risky and thread the needle a little bit more and maybe have, an extra pick or two to try and get the ball downfield. Because
be a little bit more aggressive.
Right. When he's taking all of these sacks and you're behind the sticks and you're in these,
you're hurting your offense and you're creating more 3rd and longs and you're just not,
you're creating a really tough situation for your teammates where they're facing 2nd and 20. And if there's a false start, then it's 2nd and 25. Colorado had a lot of false starts. That's why I'm bringing that up. And you really got to be a little bit smarter with the football. I mean, he went to training camp, boot camp, if you want to call it. I say that with air quotes because that's what Tom Brady called it. But he went and trained with one of the GOATs and Tom Brady. And Tom Brady was not someone who did a whole lot of things, but one of the things he was really good at was getting rid of the ball. If he was going to get sacked, he saw a play breaking down, he just chucked it out of bounds. I think if Shedeur is able to learn anything from TB12, that's the one attribute he kind of has to get.
Not winning 7 Super Bowls. That he shouldn't learn.
No, I think that the winning mentality and being a good teammate is important, but
Right.
getting rid of the football is something that's going to make or
You
break.
can't hurt your offense. That's for sure. You
And
can't.
he's also taken a lot of brutal hits as a result of holding the football or getting rid of it too late
Right.
in some cases. So
And what about the wide receiver that he's throwing to? What's his name? The corner wide receiver. His name has slipped my mind.
Yeah, you're talking about Travis Hunter.
The stud.
The stud. Yeah, the thing I think about Travis Hunter, Daniel, is that it's great because it's like having a Lamborghini to drive around on both sides of the ball. You get one of the best wide receivers in college football.
It doesn't win.
And then you also get probably one of the better corners too. I mean, he locks down a side of the field when he's not completely gassed from playing on offense. The thing I would like to see more, though, is making his snaps a little bit more meaningful. Because right now he's 20 years old. He has all the energy in the world. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He's able to
but that's
himself
over time.
all these snaps. But, in my mind, as he takes a lot of hits and the physical toll starts to add up, he's no longer going to be able to play as much. So the point here is have him play, X number of snaps on offense and then preserve him for the defensive side of the ball. Because if he's in there on 3rd and 1, 4th and inches as a blocker,
right.
and then he's coming in the next play to block on
You
first.
kind of let him play 50% on offense and just to conserve. You think that that's something that could translate to the NFL, like a kind of Shohei Ohtani situation where he's pitching and hitting? You think that Travis will be able to perform at the level of intensity that the NFL is? Because you see in the NFL, you'll see players not play every snap, even if they're only on one side of the ball, because of how much work they're putting into every play, how much running and how much hits they're taking. Do you really think he'll be able to perform both sides of the ball at the next level?
I do. And I say that because he has the talent to perform on both sides of the ball. But I'm really concerned about the injuries and the fatigue factor, because remember that game against Stanford, he was tasked with covering Alec Iomanner, and he went absolutely crazy on him, was reaching over him, catching the ball, getting a ton of separation in routes, and that was because Hunter was gassed. Right. He definitely has the talent to play at corner and at wide receiver.
Which side of the ball is he better on?
I think his value is much higher as a defensive back, because you can always go out there and find at least competent receivers, right? Defensive backs are really hard to find in the NFL.
Yeah.
So if he's going to be a high first-round pick, which everyone assumes that he will, you got to focus on being a defensive back first and locking down.
And then occasionally you can play, some offensive snaps. Maybe get him into some wildcat or whatever end arounds. Get him involved in the return game a little bit. Do some creative offensive stuff with him, and let him not be an every down receiver, because, like you said, the fatigue is too much.
Right. I like the idea of having him play 33 or so. I say 33 because that's roughly a third of the snaps at wide receiver, and then about 90% of the snaps, especially in passing situations, at defense.
At defense. Right.
He ultimately is going to be providing the most value as a corner, but he's also such a talented wide receiver that on some level you're wasting him if you're not lining him out wide or in the slot or wherever.
It's very interesting to see that, like, a franchise will draft him and what their strategy will be and how to utilize him, like you just said, the 90-30, or will they just say, like, okay, pick one side of the ball because we can't really risk you getting hurt or risk you being fatigued or whatever. A lot of the NFL has become a very safety first kind of, which is not a bad thing, unless you look at like these ticky tack, foul calls, like when you touch the quarterback's shoulder after he already threw the ball and you get 15-yard penalty for roughing the passer, whatever. I'm just saying that it's going to be hard to see a franchise go in, draft him, and then spread him so thin that he's going to be playing both sides of the ball full time, like you said. So I think the right strategy is exactly what you're saying, to kind of conserve him and let him do the higher side of the ball, which defense, and then when you need to mix him in on offense, you send him out there.
Well, yeah, and it's like he's also kind of skinny. There's concern about him holding up. He ended up missing 3 games. I'm sure you saw that viral hit that he took from Henry Blackburn in the game against CSU, where he kind of got knocked out a little bit and had
he can, you know, he can bulk up. He can, you know, size can be something that could be added. I'm sure people have told him that. I'm sure his coaches have told him to bulk up. No, you don't think that?
Yeah, I think that has happened, but he does kind of have a little bit of a slender frame. The one thing I will say about Travis is
they said that about Devonta Smith, and he's very good. So
he's the toughest and most physical guy who seems to be about 200 pounds that I've ever seen in my life. I mean, no matter how many big hits he takes, no matter how big of a receiver,
he's like Tommy DeVito.
He's always able to be resilient and make plays no matter what the circumstances are. And I think that's because his football IQ is so high. I mean, we saw that in the UCLA game when he was covering another receiver and then he saw the quarterback look him off and then he undercut a route and came up with an interception. I mean, he's so instinctive and he's so talented at the game of football. And he works really hard too. I think that's the other thing that a lot of people don't really recognize about Travis is that he's really a blue collar worker who's in the weight room.
He's not coming out this. He's not coming out this year, is he?
No, he's a sophomore this year, so he's not able to come out. And I also don't think it would be smart because he did miss some time due to injury.
Basically, he's going to be coming out next season, though. That's what you're saying.
So it's going to be interesting next season because he's going to be coming out,
and
Shedeur and Shiloh Sanders, who's Deion's older son, plays safety for Colorado. Obviously not as recognized, doesn't get kind of the same glitz and glamour.
And they're all first-round picks? They're all first-round picks?
I think that Travis, in my mind, is the only one who right now is definitely going to be a first-round pick. Shedeur still has
where would you say he would be selected? Top 10 or later in the first round?
You know, I think he's probably about a top 15 pick right now. Top 10 is a little bit tough for me, but I think someone who provides that type of value for a team and is that talented is definitely going to go in the first round.
Definitely going to go.
I think that Shedeur has the potential, if everything goes according to plan, to be the top overall pick. The quarterback class is not nearly as talented. He's very good. He obviously has a ton of potential, but I'm someone who needs to see things in order to believe him, and he needs to show improvement in 2024. For me to
he has another year to show it.
Right. And I think that's why coming back for another season is a smart move. Aside from having a very saturated class where there's a ton of talent and it's very top heavy, he also has the opportunity to set himself apart from the pack, right? There's the ability to separate and show why you're better than the other players. And the guys in next year's class are not nearly as talented as the ones in this year's class. So I think that's something that's ultimately going to play to his advantage as well. Plus, in the era of NIL, he's also making about $6 million a year from endorsements.
So he doesn't need to worry about the bag at the moment.
Like he's in a situation where he's losing money by not coming out of college, and that's something that people need to keep in mind because, you know, in the past, I think we saw players kind of have this tendency to come out of school a little bit earlier. The one classic example that popped into my mind in having this discussion is DeShone Kizer when he came out of Notre Dame and was drafted in the second round by the Browns. You know, Brian Kelly, who was his coach, had encouraged him to come back. He ultimately decided not to. And I think he kind of paid the consequences for that because when he went into the NFL, not only was he not ready, but he thought he was better than he was, and he ultimately flamed out of the league. You only get one chance to really make a mark and a first impression. And if that ends up being a bad one, you're likely not to get a better opportunity elsewhere.
And it really changes the whole life. It really changes your whole life. It's crazy.
On every single level, when Shedeur evaluates the decision, which I think that he will with his father in the offseason and sits down and thinks about it, he's going to realize that coming back for another season is not only the most logical decision, but the only decision.
Right.
So,
all right.
I mean, I think he would be smart to do that.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's wrap it up here. Just because I am running to another something. Anyway, so just going forward, you mentioned that Rodgers is going to be the quarterback next year, which I think everyone, you know, is in agreement. Joe Douglas is going to stick around. Saleh is going to stick around. Unfortunately, Nate Hackett is going to stick around as well. I say that because I don't see any offensive coordinating being done. So if you're not good at your job, why should you have it? Just because you're friends
with over for Rodgers too.
I know. That's like, they handed him the keys to the franchise, but I'm more concerned right now with the next 6 weeks. Obviously, their playoff odds are very low. Even though if you look at the standings, they're really only 2 games out from a wild card spot. So being 2 games out with 6 games left, I don't think that's the craziest hurdle in the world. Obviously, they can't win games. That's really the main problem. It's not about how much time they have left. It's, can they beat the Falcons? Can they beat the Texans? Can they beat Miami? But do you see him playing again this year? And should he or shouldn't he, in your opinion?
So there's 2 ways to look at it. Way number 1 is the Aaron Rodgers egotistical way of thinking, if you will. Rodgers thinks that he should be back on the field because he wants to prove that he can
prove to everyone
the torn Achilles faster than anyone who's ever done it in the history of the injury.
He's making the NFL his personal drama show.
Yes, he wants to show that he can do this. He wants to defy all logic and all conventional biology too, really, because everyone's telling him not to do it. And he wants to prove to himself that he can get back on the field. And if he does do that, I think he's going to have a lot more confidence. Now, the flip side of the coin, and I'm willing to make the argument that this is a better decision, is that Rodgers can't come back when his team is not competing for anything. They're literally not competing for anything. It's like you're probably not going to.
But as a fan, we need the franchise needs to know what they have. Is that not something like when you go buy a watermelon and you shake it because you're like listening what's inside, right? You need to test drive the car. You need to, date for a year before you whatever. You need to. We haven't seen him.
I thought you were supposed to date for 2.
No, whatever. It's your personal preference. My point is, the way I look at it is, yes, can he get injured? Sure. Is it risky to put him out there? Sure. Do we know what we have? We do not. And going into next year, you're just gonna punt your knowledge of whether or not you have a competent offense or a competent quarterback till next year. I just don't think that's like a smart. I think he doesn't need to play every game. Maybe let him play 1 drive. Maybe let him play 2 drives.
Aaron Rodgers loves this game too much to come back in for 1 drive. This ain't the preseason, bro. Look, I mean,
he's playing.
I think that he will be back on the field at some point.
But you don't think it's a good thing. You don't think it's a good thing.
I think it would be a dumb decision because, A, he's greatly risking the possibility of a re-injury, especially if he has to move out of the pocket, run away from someone.
But if he's medically cleared, he's medically cleared. What's the KD rested all those years. KD rested a year and he came back and he was injured within 2 weeks, even though he rested. Kawhi's always injured. I just think injuries are injuries and they're gonna happen or not. I'm not saying be irresponsible for it, but if he's cleared,
this decision.
I want to see him play. I bought tickets opening night. I got my ass in those seats, and I didn't get to see what I paid for. I want to see him play. You're right. It's not a smart decision, but I still want to see him play. I'm a fan. I want to see him play. That's it. So, I can't wait another year. I want to see him play.
It's funny because, like, instinctually, I feel exactly the same as you do.
But your mind is being.
It's like I can't possibly.
But they're not mathematically eliminated. If they win this week against the Falcons and they beat the Texans next week, he would be able to come back at around 6-7, 6-8, and they're right in the middle of the pack. The Bengals have already.
I was thinking more like 4-8, 4-9, with the way things have gone.
Okay, they need to find a way to win games. But if they do find a way to win games, like I said, the Bengals have basically punted on the season. The Browns have now Joe Flacco for the rest of the year. You don't know if they're going to continue winning games. The Steelers are like this weird team where they find a way to win, even though they have no offense. I just like the Colts are that taking that last slot. The Bills aren't really that good. It's not like they're 5 games behind. You know what I mean? Like it's 2 games. It's not. Especially if they get him back and he plays well and he wins 3 games in a row. Not that that's a guarantee, but it's still possible. It's a 1%.
I'm going to phrase
Hey, whatever. I'm just being a hopeful Jets fan. I know they're not winning. Tank. Let's get a great draft pick. Let's trade up in the draft for 3 more draft picks, and let's draft 3 players in the first round, an O-line, a wide receiver, and maybe, like you said, a back-end quarterback where you could get, like, someone who's talented. Maybe he's not the number 1 in the draft, but you could still sit him behind Rodgers. Let's get Zach Wilson working somewhere selling insurance or a car dealership or something like that, because I just don't see him having a future in the NFL, like you said, and whatever. But I still want to see him play. I just want to see it.
I'm going to put it to you this way, Daniel. The risk is a lot greater than the reward. The reward is you can get to see him play. You can realize you have such a talented quarterback who's going to be playing for you next year. But the risk is he could get hurt. And of course, that's going to be the risk when he steps on the field in 2024, even if he doesn't play the rest.
Exactly. The risk is there, whether you want to take it now or take it later. But that's what your risk is. See, this is the funny thing, because there was a whole argument before the season, Sal and BT on WFAN, whether or not he should play in the preseason. So Sal's going crazy. Like, if he gets injured in the preseason, I'll go crazy. What do you mean? You can't play him in the preseason. He played one drive in the preseason. He looked great. And then they played him the next week and he got injured. Like, it didn't matter. That's all my point. Like, if he gets in there and he re-tears his Achilles, then you're right. Like, okay, the injury that happened to him again because he rushed it, then I agree with you. But if he gets in there and he breaks his arm, I just, you know what I mean? Like, we need to know if we have a quarterback who can show up every week.
He's gonna show up every week. Now, what version of him shows up, I don't think we can come to a conclusion about that. But if the goal is to have him available when meaningful football is going to be played, and I mean, we're all going to watch the games, we're going to get emotional about them, but let's be honest, the Jets are not going to play a meaningful game the rest of the year.
Right.
The next meaningful game that they will play is in September of 2024.
So if you're the coach, and Aaron Rodgers comes to you in 3 weeks and says, "Coach, put me in, I'm ready," what do you say?
Well, first of all, I don't know if Robert Saleh has the power to veto Aaron Rodgers at this point. I think Aaron Rodgers is kind of effectively
Aaron Rodgers is the GM, he's the coach, he's the owner, he's everything.
I wouldn't say that, but he has enough pull to the point where he can override a head coach, I'm pretty sure. If Rodgers says, "I want to come play and I want to show what I can do," I don't think anyone's going to really get in the way and actively stop him. Now, I think they will try and dissuade him from doing so by saying, you could get re-hurt. We're not playing meaningful football. They'll never say that to the media, but they'll probably have that type of a candid discussion behind closed doors. And if that's the case, there is no rational reason why he should come back next season or for the rest of this season.
Right.
I mean, I just can't see like him coming back. And it's not just tearing the Achilles. I mean, he could get a bum ankle that ends up popping up next season.
Listen, it's definitely interesting. If he wasn't coming back till next year, there's no way any Jets fan would watch another game of the year. There's just no offense. But him being able to say, like, "Oh, I'm back," it's just giving a little juice. You know, to me as a Jets, it just like gives a little juice. So I guess it's going to be interesting to say. I do think you're right. However, I just want to see him play. So that's just where I'm going to leave it off.
Selfishly, I agree with you, and this will be my parting point as well. I'm kind of at a crossroads because I want to see him, and I think it would be good for everyone to get to see what he can do. But on the flip side, and when you think about putting him out there to play games that essentially don't mean anything, and you think about how that decision can backfire, and you consider the bad luck that this organization has had.
That I can't argue with you there. Part of
a decade. I mean, the last time we made the postseason, I was in middle school. To put things in perspective, it's the really
biggest drought in the NFL.
Right. It's just not the right thing to do for anyone. And while it will be nice to watch him play potentially, I just can see myself sitting there on pins and needles, being scared the whole time.
Oh my God! Did he get hurt? What happened?
Yeah, anytime he takes a big hit, and the offensive line has been pretty beat up as well. So he's going to be playing behind a less than superior unit.
Subpar.
Right.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining today, Jack. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to, future recordings as well. And keep it real, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. My pleasure, Daniel. Thanks so much.
I hope you enjoyed as well.
Oh, I think I enjoyed it, if not as much as you did. More than you did. I don't know if I can stake that claim right now, but I had a good time. I enjoyed talking Jets, some Colorado football, and I'm sure I'll be back. I hope to and would like to do this a lot more consistently.
All right.
So I'll see you
All
soon.
right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching, don't forget, like, comment, subscribe, and have a great one. Bye-bye.